I have a lot of questions about form, partially because these are various even within a single book of yours, which is something that I always experience with pleasure. The freedom of the forms that are possible and may be necessary to write about different experiences and ideas. So I have two questions regarding form. And the first one, we've been exploring the line throughout the course, throughout workshopping. Since your use of the line is so varied, and since you also write prose poetry, I was wondering if you could talk about how you feel the sentence versus the line function. So for example, how the sentence functions within the prose poem versus how the line functions within more visibly lineated poetry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great question, and for me it's really one that I kind of have to answer based on a given poem, because I feel like those are things that I'm always sort of trying to explore and I'm always interested in, but I don't actually ever have any real final sort of sense of what the line or the sentence could do, or the tension between them, because it's always surprising me. So I guess in terms of, I'll kind of talk about it in terms of the fire poem, which I can kind of just hold up so people can see it. I don't know, maybe. But there are couplets and there's a lot of space between them. And for me, I think I had tried a lot of different things out, and I kind of came to that form for this poem, in part because I really liked the sort of feeling of openness that it created in the middle of the poem, almost like, an air shaft would fan the flames ultimately of a fire, right? Like that we need air to bring oxygen to the fire, but also like the space that the fire makes, that it creates this kind of space in the landscape that wasn't there previously. So I think some of it was that, but a lot of it for me, the question or the determinations about line have to do with how it sounds. And I mostly, I pretty much always read my poems aloud and record them, and if I don't like the way it's sounding, a lot of times that means that I don't like the way it looks on the page, or, I need to be doing something more with line breaks. And I think that's line breaks, and it's the thing that I probably tinker with more than any other thing when I'm revising poems. Because I think there's just a lot of power and possibility in line breaks and in use of page space. In terms of the sentence, I set out at one point to write a bunch of poems that were called sentences on grief or sentences on whatever, and there were going to be a bunch of sentences. And then I ended up writing an essay ultimately on the sentence and the history of sentence diagramming, and that includes one of those poems in it as an example of how failed the project was when I had set out, at least in that particular way, to do something. So I don't know, the sentences to me a very intriguing kind of baffling structure. We have spent all this time, centuries trying to understand the function of the sentence on some level, and we diagram them, and we have so many different ways of making sentences, and they still kind of exceed their boundaries in these really lovely ways. So I don't know if that really fully answers your question, but for me, the line and the sentence are always going to be, I think, interesting spaces of exploration, and in particular, places where I hopefully will continually experiment in my work, because that they just always open possibilities for me. So
nice. Yeah, I think I remember you giving a talk on that at AWP on that essay. Yeah,
right.
And you were talking about, wasn't Gertrude Stein also related to
she loved sentence diagramming. Yeah, it was her favorite pastime. Yeah, which is so
funny.
funny.
No one knows how to do that anymore.
Well, and also her sentences are the most outrageous sentences. Technically, grammatically, not even really sentences. Yeah. Right. So how do you diagram a Gertrude Stein sentence is a real interesting question.
That's funny.
But yeah, she loved sentence diagramming.
So the sort of excess of the sentence, or how the sentence can't be contained by the idea of the sentence.
Yeah, exactly. Ways. Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really nice
At least for poetry's purposes.
Absolutely. Yeah, right.